Bismillah ar-Rahman. So we stopped here last time. So we discussed the throughput for the pure Aloha protocol. So pure Aloha, when the nodes are allowed to send at any point in time, so no restrictions on when the nodes will start to send frames. And we formulated the throughput in terms of the parameter G, and G is the average number of transmissions by all the nodes in the network within a time which is equal to the transmission time. Again, the definition of G is the average number of transmission within the transmission time. The average number of frame transmissions within the transmission time. And we have calculated the maximum throughput, which turns to be around 18.4% when G equals to half. So the efficiency of the pure Aloha protocol is only 18.4%. Okay, which is very low. And this gives you an indication that how inefficient the roundabouts are. Because it's very analogous to the pure Aloha protocol, that anyone is allowed to access the roundabout at any point in time. So if the load is low, the throughput is any transmission that happens will get through. If G is very low, and low here is from 0 to half, which means that the load is very, very low. After G equals to half, you start to have more and more collisions, so the possibility of collision will increase. So the maximum efficiency of the system is only 18.4%. So to illustrate the throughput, so we have this example: a pure Aloha network transmits 200 bit frames on a shared channel of 200 kilobits per second, which means that the transmission time is how much? One second? This is kilobits per second. 1 second is too high. It's 1 millisecond, right? Because this is 200 times 10 to the power 3, okay? Which means that the transmission time is 1 millisecond. What is the throughput if all the stations produce, on the average, 1,000 frames per second? So, what do you think we should be able to calculate when we use this number? 1,000 frames per second. What do we need to calculate here? The bits? We said that the throughput for the pure Aloha protocol is calculated using which parameter? Which parameter? G. So G again is the average number of transmissions within a duration of time which is equal to the transmission time. So when I see the number 1,000 frames per second, I should be able to figure out that I can calculate the parameter G. But the 1,000 frames per second is per 1 second. So per 1 millisecond, what is the number of frames? So basically we can, just to make it easy, so we have 1,000 frames for 1 second. So how many frames do we have in 1 millisecond? Okay? So the number of transmissions in 1 millisecond بتساوي 1000 times 10 to the power minus 3, which is 1 frame per 1 millisecond. Which means that G is so G is 1. So so for the case A, G is 1. So what is the throughput in that case? It's simply based on the fact that G is 1, S is equal to E to the power minus 2. Okay? So for the case, similarly, for the case of 500, if I have 1000 frames, can give me 1 frame per second. 500 can give me how much? Half. صح? Which means that G here is half. And for the case C, G is 1/4. Okay? So for A, so we can say that simply for A, for the case A, G is 1, S is E to the power minus 2. For the case B, G is half, and S is half E to the power minus 1. صح? For C, G is 1/4, and S equal 1/4 E to the power minus half. As simple as that. So we can figure out that for the case of A, if I have 1000 frames per second, I have 1 frame per 1 millisecond. If I have 500 frames per second, which means I have half a frame every 1 millisecond. So G is half. Okay, it's clear? Okay. It's the same. So for this is for A, B, and C, and it turns out that you will notice that for G equals to half, S is 18.4%, or 0.184, and when it's 1/4, it's less, and when it's 1, it's less, which means that this one is the maximum. As we have verified before, the maximum throughput is when G equals to half. Okay? Any question? So G is calculated based on the fact that we have to calculate the number of average transmissions from all the stations within a duration of time which is equal to the transmission time. So as we can see, the efficiency of the pure Aloha protocol is very low. 18.4% is very low. So one trick that they have used to enhance the efficiency or the maximum throughput a little bit is simply by considering slots, time slots. Okay? So going back to our famous example of unmoderated or unorganized meeting, okay? So this translates to the fact that we have specific time instances when anyone is allowed to speak. So you have to adjust your clock, and if the time comes, anyone can speak. So at time T, any node can send. But none of the nodes can send at time between T and T plus 1, or T plus this duration. So no node can send in the middle of this time. That's the only modification. So for slotted Aloha, simply nodes can transmit only at the beginning of the time slot. So this is a simple modification, but we will see the effect of this modification on the efficiency. Okay, so this is clear. So the only difference for the for the slotted Aloha is the fact that nodes are allowed to transmit only at specific time instances. Okay? And it turns out that the efficiency for such a system is G times E to the power minus G. Not minus 2G here. Okay. Times E to the power minus G, which is higher or lower compared to the pure Aloha protocol. This is higher or lower? This is higher because E to the power minus something is, this is a decreasing factor. Because this is minus, the exponent is minus. So when the exponent increases, this means that it decreases faster. واضحة? So, and it turns out that the throughput, the maximum throughput is in fact 0.368, or in other words 36.8%, which is double the pure Aloha protocol, only by restricting nodes to send at specific time instances. This increases the time, the efficiency of the system. Okay? And this happens when G is equal to 1, not G equal half. Remember that. And I will leave this as an exercise based on the exact same derivation that we have done before. You can drive this easily and figure out that G, in that case, that leads to maximum throughput is in fact 1, not half. So when G is 1, the throughput is simply e to the power minus 1, which is in that case 0.368. Okay? Is it difficult to drive this? I think it's very easy. Again, you take the derivative of the function, and then you equal to 0, and then you will figure out that G is equal to 1. You put 1 here, S maximum equal to e to the power minus 1. So it's easy. So why is that? Why is the throughput increasing in that case? It turns out that the vulnerable time in that case is the transmission time, not double the transmission time. Why? Let's do it the same way that we have done it last time. So imagine if I have a node A, and this node A transmits at time T, and it spends a time which is the transmission time, T plus T transmission. Okay, let's see what is the possibility that the collision will have. What is the possibility? So if we have a time T minus T transmission. Okay. If a node starts to send at this point in time, at this instance, T minus T transmission, will the collision happen or not? Will the collision happen? First of all, is the node allowed to send at this time? Of course, yes. Right? Because we said we are allowed to send at instances which is the multiples of the transmission. So the node is allowed to send. But will the collision happen? No, because the node will definitely finish transmission before, because this duration is the transmission time. So it will finish before A transmits. So the collision will not happen. So, type. Let's see if a node starts here. If a node starts here, the collision will happen, right? But is the node allowed to transmit at this point in time? No. So the node will not be able to transmit. This is the difference. In the case of slotted Aloha, none of the nodes are allowed to send in the middle of the transmission. At the beginning or the end. So the only possibility that the collision will happen is when the node starts when? Here. So if node B sends at this point in time, the collision will happen. Right? صح ولا لا? Is the node allowed to send here or here or here? No. If the node sends here, no collision will happen. So only if the node sends within this duration. Which means that the variable time in that case is only the duration of the transmission. Okay? So that's why we said that the vulnerable time in that case is less compared to the pure Aloha. The vulnerable time is the transmission time. And because of that, the throughput is higher. Because the probability of collision reduces by considering the slots. Okay? Any question here? No, it does not eliminate the collision because, again, multiple nodes are allowed to send within the same transmission time. They are only allowed to send at the beginning of this time slot. But they are not allowed to send in the middle. That's the only difference. So using the exact same example that we had before, it's very easy to figure out that for case A, G is 1. It's the same values, same parameters. So G is 1. The efficiency or the throughput is 36.8%. And then G is equal to half, you will see that this will be reduced. When G is equal to 1/4, this will be reduced, which means that the maximum is 36.8, which is طبعا double compared to the pure Aloha, just by considering the time slots. Okay. So what is the cost in the case of slotted Aloha? Can anyone tell me what is the cost? The cost here is only the synchronization, because now the nodes will have to synchronize itself at the beginning of the time slot. So the only cost I paid here is the fact that nodes will have to observe the synchronized time slots, which complicates the implementation slightly. Because in the case of pure Aloha, the implementation is very easy. It's very easy. Anyone is allowed to transmit, and if there is any collision, I will detect it through not receiving the acknowledgement, and then I will increment K and E and back off based on generating a random number. It's very easy. For the case of slotted Aloha, I have to ask myself, is this the beginning of the time slot? Is this the beginning? And the problem here is that I have to do this synchronization amongst all the nodes, which means I have to synchronize the clocks of all the nodes. I have to inform them that, be aware that this is the beginning of the time slot. So this synchronization is always complicated in terms of implementation. But the gain is higher efficiency. Anything not clear here? So that's for the case of G equals to half, the efficiency or the throughput is a 0.303, 30.3%. which is lower. And in the case of quarter, it's 19.5%. So the max is equal to 1. So this figure illustrates the space-time model of the collision in SYSMA system. So the evolution of ALOHA or slotted ALOHA is what we call a carrier sense multiple axis. So what happens here is that we want to increase the efficiency of the system. We want to, again, increase it beyond 36.8%. You know what 36.8% efficiency means? This means that when you send 100 frames, you only get around 36.8 frames. You get them through the channel within a specific time duration. Of course, this is still low efficiency. Okay, so what they have thought about to increase this efficiency is by allowing or by restricting the nodes that, again, in our famous example, meeting example, I ask you that, please, before you speak, you just listen to anyone else who is speaking. If you find someone else speaking, don't start speaking. Okay? So that's why they call it a carrier sense. Carrier sense. Carrier sense means that you listen before you speak. If you find anyone else is speaking, you abstain from speaking. So this figure here illustrates the space-time model for the SYSMA protocol. And this we want to illustrate here that just the fact that two nodes are sending, and node B here is sending a time T1, okay, and node C is sending a time T2, which is different from T1, okay. Still the collision will happen. Why? Because just the fact that B is sending a time T1, it has to wait, or it has to spend some time in transmission, right? So this time is the transmission time of the frame. This whole time is the time that B spends to transmit the frame. And this time is the time that the frame will spend to propagate across the channel to get all the way to D. Okay? So again, this time is the transmission time for B. Okay? When B starts sending at time T1, this time is the propagation time. So the propagation time is used for 1 bit, and it's spent for this bit to propagate all the way from one node to another. Okay, that's very important to realize and visualize the different parameters on this figure, because based on that we will derive some important aspects and parameters for the SYSMA system. So this is the transmission time, and this is the propagation time. And when do we say that the collision happens? When we have some overlap here between the transmission from from B and from C. So the first time that the transmission happens is here, when you have an overlap. Okay? So for this entire area, there is a collision, because there is an overlap between transmission from B and C. Okay? in this area here, the collision will not be realized yet by any node in that direction. So any node in this range will not be able to figure out that there is a collision. When any node can figure out that there is a collision, when I have an overlap, which means that the first node that will realize that there is a collision is a node which exists in here, in this point. So, because this is when the overlap first started. Okay? Okay? It's also important to realize that when there is a collision, none of the nodes will be able to decode anything. This is the rule, because nowadays they have resolved this issue. So that even when there is a collision, I can still detect the signals from one another. But for us, the rule is when there is a collision, none of the nodes will be able to decode these transmissions. Neither transmissions. Okay? So everything is clear here. So it's important to know the transmission time, the propagation time. When does a node start? When the node starts sending, it sends the first bit of the transmission. It gets propagated all the way, and the second bit, and so on. So it spends a time which is equal to the transmission time. The SISMA system. So this means that when A starts transmitting at this point, okay, the frame will propagate, and B will be able to listen to the transmission from A only at this point. Only at this point here. Okay? And C will not be able to detect that A is transmitting until this point, which is not T1. It's below T1. Why? Because the signal takes some time to propagate. Why are we stressing on this? Is that if C starts transmitting at this point, if C wants to transmit at this point, based on the SISMA system, I should be able to ask you, is C allowed to send at this point or not? Yani if C wants to send at this point, will it send? Yes. Why? Because it will sense and it will figure out that A is not transmitting. صح? So it will send. And based on that, the collision will happen. Collision will happen where if C sends, it will spend some time to propagate, so the collision will happen somewhere here. Will D send at this point in time? Yes. Will C send at this point in time? No. Because D should be able to listen to what A is transmitting at this point. Right? Because the transmission from A has reached D already by this time. Okay? So if D wants to transmit at this point, it will realize that A is transmitting, so it will not transmit. So this is this is how the SISMA system works. It does not use time slots like slotted Aloha. So there's no time slots here. But the main difference is that the nodes will have to, before they send, they have to sense the channel. If the channel is idle, then they send. If the channel is busy, then they don't send. Okay? Any question? Okay. So there are three types of behavior. That the SYSMA system uses. We have the one persistent system, we have the non-persistent system, and we have the P-persistent. The third one is called P-persistent system. So for the non-persistent system, these policies or these procedures affect how often do we sense the channel. Okay? So the nodes, each node has to sense the channel continuously, which means that it will keep sensing the channel every 1 nanosecond, very often. And once it finds that the channel is idle, then it declares the state of the channel as idle. So if it wants to send, it will send right away. And this is called one persistent. Persistent here means that the nodes are persistent in sensing the channel. They sense the channel very often, and once the channel is triggered idle, they start to send. Okay? So this is the easiest and logical. The problem here is that sensing every 1 nanosecond very often, it's a big overhead. Big overhead in many ways. Big overhead from the circuit complexity point of view, from the energy point of view. Like imagine if your cell phone is sensing the channel every 1 nanosecond. You are wasting a lot of energy without transmitting anything. You're spending most of the time sensing the channel. You find it's easy. You find it's busy. So you keep sensing the channel. So you spend so much time and you're wasting so much energy and you're not transmitting anything. So this one persistent is good from the sense that whenever the channel is idle, you will get triggered right away because you sense very often. However, from the overhead point of view, it's very bad. ماشي؟ طيب. Non-persistent works in a different way. Instead of sensing the channel very often, we are allowed to sense the channel every time NSS, every long duration. So I sense the channel once. If I find it busy, I wait for some time. This time is configurable. And then I sense again. Okay? So the problem here is that the channel was idle at this point, but I did not figure out that the channel is idle until this point. Right? Why? Because I don't sense the channel very often. So from the overhead point of view, this is less, right? So this is good from the overhead point of view. However, it's bad from the opportunistic point of view. It's not opportunistic enough that when the channel is idle, I get triggered right away. Okay? So of course, for the case of non-persistent, this wait time can be compromised in such a way that I balance the throughput, okay, and the energy. So I don't have to spend so much time on sensing, but at the same time, if the channel is idle, I don't have to wait for all this duration to figure out that it's idle. So I can reduce or increase this wait time a little bit in order to compromise the energy and or the overhead and the throughput.
Is the wait time specific? Specific?
The time, this time is fixed. It's fixed, but pre-configurable. I can configure this time, okay, to increase or decrease. But once it's one parameter, you set it to one value and that's it. So in other words, I can resort the non-persistent to the one persistent by reducing this wait time to be very, very, very small. So in that case, I go back to the persistent case. Okay. I should also mention here is that there is one disadvantage here as well, which is actually an advantage here. The disadvantage here is that if you are one persistent, this means that you are continuously sensing the channel, right? And once the channel is idle, you figure out right away, which means that you will send right away. But this means that other nodes will send right away. صح? Because if the network is one persistent, this means that all the nodes are sensing the channel continuously, and when the channel is idle, if you have more than one channel with the data trying to send, the collision will happen here with a very high probability. Right? صح? Here, if you adjust this wait time between the nodes such that the nodes can sense the channel at different time, one node can sense the channel is idle here, another node can sense the channel is idle here. Okay? So the nodes will not have collision with the same probability like this one. Right? You set the wait time not necessarily different. So one node will sense here and here. So the wait time is the same, but it's just shifted. Right? So it's only shifted. Because if you make it different, this means that you favor one node over the other. صح? You give higher priority because you are reducing the wait time for some nodes and increasing the wait time for other nodes. This means that you are giving favors to the node. But what we are saying here is that the wait time could be fixed for all nodes. However, if it's shifted, then the nodes will have fairness, and at the same time the nodes will sense the channel at different time instances, which means that if a node senses the channel here before this node will send, which means that the other node will abstain from transmitting. Huh?
Can we use the different method for each node?
For each node? No. The whole network has to use one of these policies. Okay? So the nodes have to set their policy, and because if you use different policies for each node, this means that the nodes are not synchronized, and the throughput might be affected, and the collision might increase. Fixed but shifted, يعني something like this. يعني one node, like if the channel is busy at this point in time, okay, so one node will sense the channel here and here and here. So this is the wait time. It's fixed. Okay, another node will sense the channel here and here and here. So it's the same wait time, but it's shifted. So this means that this node will realize that the channel is idle. It will start transmitting. Once this node transmits, this node will realize that there is someone else transmitting, so it will stop. So the collision will not happen. Okay? So this is the case of the non-persistent. The third policy or the third procedure is a compromise between the two. Is a compromise between the two. What this policy tries to solve is basically to reduce the probability of collision when the channel is idle. Because the problem with the one persistent that I continuously sense the channel, and then when the channel is idle, all the nodes are allowed to send at the same time, which increases the possibility of collision, because if two nodes can send, they will collide. Okay? So here, for the P persistent, first I sense the channel, and here either I sense it continuously, similar to the one persistent, or I can use a wait time. Okay? So for the P persistent case, there are two variations. Either you continuously sense, or you can use a wait time. So you can adjust the sensing time. You can configure the sensing time in order to compromise the overhead. So that's one. Once I realize that the channel is idle, then I don't actually send right away. For the one persistent case, I send with a probability of 1. Here, I generate a random number. If this random number is less than P, I send. If this random number is higher than P, I don't send. Which means that I send with a probability P. So here, I send with a probability P. So what does this do? This means that since all the nodes have continuously sensed the channel, all the nodes found that the channel is idle at this point. So if I have 2 nodes or 3 nodes, each node here will generate a random number. And a node is allowed to send with a probability P. What does that mean? This means that each node will generate a random number. If this random number is less than P, the node sends. If this random number is more than P, the node does not send. So hopefully, by generating this probability, okay, I have less probability of collision. Why? Because when the nodes generate random number, the random numbers generated at different nodes are different. صح? Which means that I reduce the number of nodes that are transmitting at the same time. So one persistent does not do that, because one persistent, once the channel is idle, I send with a probability of 1. That's what it means. You send with a probability of 1. But here we send with a probability of P. And P is again another configurable parameter that you fix for the whole network. Okay? So a node sends with a probability B and does not send with a probability of 1 minus P. Okay? So this policy here is actually a compromise between the other two policies. It tries to reduce the probability of collision by using this P persistent parameter. When this probability is fixed for the entire network, this means that I have fairness across all the nodes, because it's the same parameter. So all the nodes will have the same statistics, but at different points they generate different number. Right? So at different points in time they generate different number. But on the average, they take equal opportunity to access the channel. on the average. When I run the system for a long time horizon, one node will access the channel at one point, and another node will access the channel at another point, because the probability in terms of statistics is the same. So all the nodes will have equal opportunity. But at the same time, I reduce the probability of collision. Okay? Any questions so far? Any confusion? Okay. Okay, so we'll stop here.